Hello everyone, it's Melissa, the teen librarian at Northwest Santa Rosa Library next to Coddingtown Mall, and I am here today because I'm going to attempt to make and teach you all how to make a recipe that is in one of my favorite books, With the Fire on High. I'll talk about the book in a minute, but first, what are we making today? The recipe is called Tembleque. It is a Puerto Rican dessert, usually served around Christmas time, and it's essentially coconut pudding. I've had it a few times in my life. My mom is Puerto Rican, so during trips to the islands, I've had it with family members and stuff, but I've never actually made it. The recipe that was passed down to me was flan, not tembleque, so we're gonna try it out. So the reason I wanted to make this recipe, aside from sheer curiosity and wanting to learn new things with all of you, is also it's the first recipe that shows up in this book, With the Fire on High. So, With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo is a teen realistic fiction book, and it basically follows Imani, who is, she's Puerto Rican, but she's mainland US Puerto Rican, so like me, like born here in the States. And she is, she's really good at cooking. She loves to experiment with cooking and adding her own twist on flair on things, which we're not going to go so far. We're going to do just like a classic recipe since this is the first time I'm trying this, but she is just an amazing cook. And she's given the opportunity this year in school, so she's in high school, to take a special culinary arts program. I'm so sorry, that's my cat in the background making a lot of noises. She has the opportunity to take a culinary arts program for the whole school year, and the focus is Spanish food this year. So Spanish food is different than Puerto Rican food. There's some different spices, like there's some similarities, but there's also like different spices used and stuff. So this is like a whole new experience for her, and she's really excited because she is kind of considering a career like being a chef one day. But the real problem and conflict in the book is that she wants to do this, and they're planning a trip as a class for spring break to go to Spain to actually like study with Spanish chefs and stuff and get the full experience and try Spanish food like in Spain, which is super cool. But she is actually a teen mom, so she is taking care of her little girl, trying to raise money for this trip, keep up with her grades like in all her other classes, and she also lives with her abuela. Her mother isn't alive anymore, and her dad lives on the island in Puerto Rico. He's kind of absent from her life. So she has all of this responsibility. And at the same time, she kind of likes someone, maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's romance. So she's just like, how do I juggle all of this? And she's only 16, so that's a lot on anyone's plate, but especially for a 16-year-old. So it's a really sweet book. There's tons of recipes throughout, which like it's a delicious sounding book when you read. So yeah, I recommend it, and I'm gonna try making her tembleque recipe. So I will meet you in my kitchen. Okay, so this is my kitchen, and I have all the ingredients already set up. So what we're gonna need are 2 cans of coconut milk, and make sure that it's not light coconut milk. Make sure it's like the full 100% coconut milk. I tried making it with light coconut milk earlier this week, and it wasn't thick enough. And then we're gonna have 1/2 cup of cornstarch, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then we also have cinnamon, which goes on at the end. And then I have my, I was gonna call it a bowl, but it's usually what I use for pasta. But you could also use like a thick, like a bigger frying pan type of thing, as long as it's no stick. I have a spoon, this we don't need. I have a whisk. And then these are the molds that after we cook it, we're going to put it in these. And I filled these up with a little bit of water, which we're going to empty out before we fill it with the tembleque, because that's there so it doesn't stick. So now, really quick, as we can see in the book, she makes special lemon verbena tembleque, and what we're making today is just regular classic tembleque. Because, well, quite frankly, the way that what I know how to make from Puerto Rico is flan. That's what my family recipe is. And I've never made tembleque before, so this is gonna be an experiment. Okay, so now I'm just opening up the cans of coconut milk. So the difference between the full fat coconut milk, which is what this is, and the light coconut milk, which I think is why my experiment didn't work earlier this week when I practiced making it. The full fat coconut milk comes, it's almost like coconut oil at the top, because it's like the liquid will be more at the bottom and this is all the fat, and we need that so that the dessert can hold its, like, congeal properly. I think in nutrition and like food science they call it an emulsifier. So now that I have these done or unopened, let me get a spoon. Okay, so I'm just going to, you hear that splash? That's the liquid. So I'm just emptying these out into my big pot. Okay, maybe, let's see. You can see, this isn't gonna work. I'm going to pause this and come back in a second. Okay, so you see, this is just, so the stove is not on yet, and this is the coconut milk from the cans, and you'll see a bunch of it's solid and a bunch of it's liquid. So we're just going to whisk this so that we can get it more smooth and mixed up together. You could probably use a spoon, but I think that a whisk is a little bit easier, or a fork if you don't have a whisk. So just going to do that. There's still a chunk in there. And then when this is all done being whisked, we're going to first add in the cornstarch. Let's see. So this piece doesn't want to. This is supposed to be, you know, the easy version of the recipe. I actually was talking to my mom about this, and she has some really old cookbooks from her abuela from Puerto Rico, and she was looking up the recipe when I told her I wanted to make it. And in those old cookbooks, it was literally like, go get a coconut and crack open the coconut, and then you have to shave off the coconut meat and use the milk from the coconut. So we are lucky that this comes in cans now. And I think that's why the time I remember having this, actually, I was 16 and we spent Christmas in Puerto Rico with our relatives that year. And I remember it being served and really liking it then. And I'm sure I had it before because when I was little, we used to go to Puerto Rico a lot. My abuela used to live there. And I think the thing though is that it's usually served around Christmas time because it used to be so labor intensive, but now it's a little bit easier to make. Okay, there's still some clumps in there, but I think that when we turn on the heat, they're gonna melt down, kind of like if you've ever used coconut oil, which that might be what this is, that congealed at the top, the oils, but coconut oil will melt really quickly. So now I'm gonna have my cornstarch. I already took out half of a cup and just going to shake it around a little bit and add it. And so once again, the heat is not on yet. Doing this all before the heat because we don't want to heat it up yet. So this is really important because when I tried making this earlier this week, another mistake I made was I didn't have a whisk and it was too clumpy, and you don't want it to be clumpy. You want it to be completely smooth, and it's easier to do that before the heat is on. So I'm just going to really whisk it and you know, like this, because it's also a texture thing. Like, you don't want to be biting into clumps of uncooked cornstarch when your dessert is supposed to be smooth and jiggly. So see, it's getting a bit smoother now. There's still some clumps, and I think that the increased whisking got rid of the clumps of the coconut milk too. Oh, there's some in there. Okay, so now we're just about ready to add the sugar. So this stove is still not on. 1/2 cup of sugar. I already emptied it out. And I believe we want to make sure it's white sugar, not powdered sugar or brown sugar. When you're making desserts, it seems like that wouldn't make a difference, but it really does, the type of sugar you use. And it's also a color thing because this is supposed to be like a creamy white dessert. So if you add certain ingredients, it's not going to look that way or taste that way. So it's kind of interesting because cooking and baking, like, there's definitely an art to it, but there's also chemistry and science, because you don't want to you know, add the wrong things, you get a different product. But then you also, once you know the recipe well, you can start experimenting, which is kind of what Imani does in the book. That's why she adds I believe is it lemon verbena leaves? And she doesn't add straight up vanilla. Like, we're used to vanilla like coming in a liquid when we bake, but, which this is not baking, but a bunch of vanilla beans and lemon verbena leaves. So that's, like, she's using straight up like the actual plants, which is super cool and probably super tasty, but also too advanced for me right now. Okay, and now we're lastly going to take the 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. I'm just using regular sugar for this. So I'm going to whisk it again. You know, in retrospect, this might have been easier to do, like, have this on the table since I'm not using it on the stove right now because it keeps jiggling a bit. So you'll see that it's very smooth now. Those are some bubbles. Now I'm going to make sure it's on the burner, and I'm going to turn on my stove to about like the halfway point-ish. So not too hot, not too low. And now this is kind of the tricky part. We need to keep it stirring, or keep stirring it. I think we'll use the spoon first, because if we let it sit without stirring it, it's going to burn. I don't know if anyone's ever made flan, like, that's one of the components, is you have to melt sugar and you don't want it to burn. And I'm sure there's plenty of other dishes like that. So we're just going to constantly stir it for a while, and I will come back in a few minutes when we've gotten the proper thickness. So keep stirring. Okay, so I've been stirring and whisking for a few minutes, and I came back. It's not quite ready yet, but I just wanted to show you how smooth and silky it is now. So that's the consistency that we want for now. And as we stir it, it's going to get a little bit thicker. So remember, this is basically like a coconut pudding. So we do want it to be like not watery and thick, but we also don't want it to be clumpy, which is one of the concerns about not stirring it for a while. So, look at that. It's so smooth. Okay, so I can feel with my spoon at the bottom, it's starting to thicken up a little bit. So I'm gonna take out my spoon for a minute and bring my whisk back. So I'm just going to continue doing this until it gets a little bit thicker, and I'll come back when it's ready. For starters, there shouldn't be this much smoke, but I think there's something underneath my burner that dropped and is getting all smoky, but you'll see now, yeah, it's getting thick. So we're going to take the whisk again, and you can really see now it's progressed from being that like silky smooth liquid to being more of a silky smooth pudding type texture. So you can see it's getting thicker. So if it was liquid, it would just instantly drop off, but now we're starting to get some consistency here. Okay, so it's almost ready. So when it's done and we're at the right consistency, okay, so now it's starting to boil a bit. That means we're almost done. And I kind of need 2 hands for this. Let's see. So I'm just going to turn off the stove. And see now, pudding-like consistency. Just going to give it a few more whisks. Still getting the residue heat from the stove. Okay, so just going to move that off of the burner. And like I said before, I filled these up with a little bit of water. This is so that this will not stick when you're trying to get it out. So I'm just going to empty these out. And if you don't have little bowls, you can use like little teacups or other, but like you could use bigger bowls like this. You could use a bigger bowl, like more the size of this if you wanted to. Because you could just make it like one gigantic one instead of single servings, kind of like sometimes you'll see flan served that way, or like a kind of like a cake. Okay, so now I'm going to switch the view on this so you can watch me fill these in. Okay, so I've got my little bowls. I emptied out most of the water. And now I've got the tembleque ready to put in the bowls. And this part, be careful with, because this is very hot. It's been on the stove. It just got to a boiling point. So I'm just going to take my spoon and pour some into here. Actually, I think I can do a kind of with this. You might want to get some help for this, to have somebody hold the bowl while you spoon it in or pour. And so I put it up to about here. So you can see what that looks like. Excuse my hand. So I'm just going to do that for the rest of them. And you can really tell that the consistency, it's not liquidy, but it's not solid either, which is what we were aiming for. And last one. So I've got a little bit extra. I only have 4 of these little bowls. So I'm going to go get, let's see, 1 more bowl. So I'm just using a regular cereal type bowl for this one. So this will just be an extra big serving. Okay. So that was how we make it on the stove, we still need to put all of these guys into the fridge for a couple hours for them to set. They're not ready to eat right now, and I'm just gonna wait for them to cool down a bit to room temperature. Right now they are pretty hot, and then I'll put them in the fridge, and I will see you in a couple hours. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours, and I've taken this out of the fridge, and now we're going to try and take it out. So what I did was I used my knife and kind of just fit it around the edges to make sure that it is gonna come out. Now, if you've ever made flan before, this is similar. What we're going to do is put the plate on top of the bowl, and we're going to flip it and hope that it comes out. Well, it doesn't want to, so I'm going to try again. Okay, I got it out. It didn't want to come out. So now we serve it with some cinnamon sprinkled on top. Oop, that's not very pretty, but I'm sure you can make it look better than that. And then we can dig in. So you see the consistency, it's all jiggly and firm, like pudding. And let's try it. Pretty good. So that's how you make Puerto Rican tembleque.